So we've got a lot of great sessions here coming up today. We're in the product room, and to kick things off today, we're going to be talking all about Jamf Now. And to do that, I've got the product manager for Jamf Now, Mr. Tad Johnson. Tad, welcome.
All right. Hey, thanks, Nick. Thanks. All right, good morning. All right, we've got standing room only in the Nicollet Ballroom this morning. Great. So you might ask yourself, what are we doing talking about Jamf Now for a conference that's primarily focused on Jamf Pro? And that's a good question. What I want to share with you today is a little info about why we built Jamf Now, a little bit about who it's for, and then talk about how we approach this idea of bringing the magic of MDM to an audience that is typically not made up of the type of IT professionals that are coming to a JNUC conference. And then we're going to talk about how we've approached that with the design of the product to bring the magic of MDM to a whole new audience. So first off, quick show of hands. How many people in the room have tried Jamf Now already? Okay, this is great. Great. So we've got plenty of new folks. This is a little view of what Jamf Now looks like. It's going to look a little familiar for everyone who's now seen Jamf Pro version 10. You'll notice that the design language is, we share some features of the design language. Of course, that's intentional. What we want to do with our product portfolio is build different products that can solve similar goals for different audiences and make it fairly easy to switch between the two if you ever need to. Jamf Now is an MDM tool. You can manage all of your iPhones, iPads, iPod Touch, Mac computers. And we've done this in a way to really, the idea with Jamf Now, as the name implies, is that we've tried to build a tool that's really easy to get started with. When we were thinking about the name for Jamf Now, we said, okay, what's the essence of what this tool can do? And the idea was you can go from thinking, hey, I would like to have an MDM tool, to having your Jamf Now environment set up and running in about 15 minutes. And that feels pretty good. That's about as close to now as we can expect in the world of software. So who did we build this for? Let's talk about that for a moment. Jamf Now is really built for all of those businesses that want to use the great transformative power of Apple technology, who are using Macs and iPhones and iPads. They want to run their business with modern apps that can do, that can replace or can transform a lot of the business processes that we're all familiar with, and can do that in a much more mobile, cloud-friendly way. And the idea with Jamf Now is that we're building this tool for those organizations that might not have anyone on staff with IT in their job title. We have a lot of our customers are the people that are actually using our software have titles like office manager or operations manager or sales director. And so what we're trying to do here is help people get the full value out of their Apple ecosystem without investing a ton in specifically building out an IT discipline. We see this a lot with the type of, kind of that modern office worker who is rarely in the office. With more and more people that are doing their work away from the office, they're traveling to visit customers, they're traveling to conferences, and so we see apps like Box where you can share files back and forth really easily. DocuSign, so you don't have to ever print out paper contracts anymore. Of course, Expensify, that lets you do all your expense tracking. And there's really neat apps like Xero, which is actually doing a full accounting stack with a mobile app and a cloud service connected to it, so you can get away from having to run, the old kind of like desktop-style accounting software. We're also seeing this in the retail industry, where I'm sure a lot of you have seen where you go to buy a cup of coffee, or you're going out to a retail store, and instead of the old-fashioned cash register experience, you might have an iPad on a little stand, and you swipe your card, or you put the card in the chip reader, and the whole point-of-sale experience can be done from an iPad. Other examples where in some retail stores, they don't even have that idea anymore, where the sales associates are walking around with an iPhone or an iPod Touch and a little sled, and they can actually do the whole point-of-sale directly from there. There's other neat apps that we've seen. Belly is one of these that can do customer loyalty programs, but instead of having a punch card that you have to keep in your wallet and you're always going to lose, it can do it all through an iOS app. And organizations are making it more efficient to do their employee tracking and scheduling with apps like Deputy. And of course, FreshBooks is another example of the new era of accounting software. And then one industry where we're actually finding a huge amount of interest is the construction industry and all the related construction trades. And if you can imagine, in any scale of a construction project, whether it's building the US Bank Stadium down the road there, or whether it's building a single-family home, there's always going to be multiple different companies or multiple different professionals that are coordinating their work together. And so things like sharing plans, sharing schedules, sharing updates is really critical. There's an app called PlanGrid that we've heard. The story here is that you basically the app pays for itself the moment you use it, because the cost of having one mistake on a large construction project is going to be in the hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. And so making sure everyone has the same plan, the same updates is really critical. FieldWire is an example of a product or project management tool that's really optimized for the construction industry. Fall Safety, the one in red there, this is a really cool app that uses the accelerometer on your iPhone, and it can detect if you have experienced weightlessness momentarily and then a sudden impact, indicating that you might have just fallen. It can actually send out an alert, and it can call someone if you don't respond to that alert within 45 seconds. And this is an example of we're using pure off-the-shelf technology, and it can literally save lives. Really cool stuff. And then FileMaker Go is an example of an app that lots of construction companies are using to custom tailor their whole project management system just for them. So in all these examples, and of course there's many more, there's a common set of workflows that these organizations have. They want to deploy apps. That's usually the first motivator for looking for an MDM solution like Jamf Now. Hey, I've got all these apps, I've got all these Macs and iPads and iPhones. I want to get the right apps on the right devices. Number two is they need to protect data. We've all heard way too many scary stories in the past few years about sensitive data being stolen, or someone's laptop being left in a taxi cab that has the whole payroll system on it, or other examples of data falling into the wrong hands. And so, of course, security is a multifaceted process, but one of the most important things you can do is make sure that all of your data is encrypted and make sure that every device that can access that data has a strong password. And so that's an easy thing that you can apply using Jamf Now. We also, of course, need to connect to the cloud. We have long passed the era when you can have a computer be productive that's not connected to the internet. And along with security, it's of course best practices to always have a strong Wi-Fi password. And ideally, you don't have to give that out to all of your employees. So the ability to set up devices with a strong Wi-Fi password that you don't have to write down on a Post-it note, easy example of a good workflow. And then last is just tracking equipment. If you can imagine in a small business where you might have 25 employees and each employee has an iPhone and a MacBook, we're talking about several tens of thousands of dollars worth of equipment, of assets that you'd like to keep track of. You want to make sure that you have your warranty information, that you can keep track of that. You want to make sure that you have serial numbers in case anything ever goes missing and you need to submit an insurance claim. And in general, your accountant will be much happier with you if you can actually tell you where those tens of thousands of dollars worth of assets are at any one time. So these are the common workflows that we've approached. And of course, for anyone who's familiar with Jamf Pro, you can pretty easily see how, yeah, these are the same kind of workflows that we see with our Jamf Pro customers. But the key difference with Jamf Now is that we wanted to approach delivering these workflows, but without any assumptions about prior experience or prior knowledge about MDM. So we're not assuming that a Jamf Now customer comes to us with any training on how to do device management. We're not assuming that a Jamf Now customer has previous IT experience. As I mentioned before, it's very common that the users that we support with Jamf Now are not in an IT role. They're usually some other primary job function, and then they're also doing this device setup as a side responsibility. We don't assume any MDM familiarity, and in most cases, Jamf Now is the first MDM tool that our customers have experienced. And we're not assuming that there's a deep knowledge of IT terminology. So this is kind of the assumptions we're making is that we can't make assumptions about the previous experience that our customers are coming in with. But what's the big goal here? The big goal is that we want to deliver the magic of Apple with MDM. And we've all seen this magic. This is our favorite little tagline. Step 1, you open the box. Step 2, you power on the MacBook. And step 3, there is no step 3. That's the goal, is that we want to deliver that experience. You've got automatic enrollment, where you don't have to actually put your hands on the keyboard in order to complete your enrollment. Using the device enrollment program, DEP, that can work right out of the box. Your apps should just appear. You don't have to go to the App Store and search through the different app results to find each app and install them individually. We're leveraging the volume purchase program, VPP, so that right after that automatic enrollment, all the apps that you need for your devices will appear. And even simple stuff, like just making sure that your email is ready. It's not a difficult task to set up an email configuration on an iPhone or on a Mac, but if you multiply that by the dozens or hundreds of devices you need to do that on, you can see where even a simple task like this can really be, automating that can really accelerate a deployment project. And in a summary, if we can get to that state where it just works, this is really the goal that we want to deliver. We want to deliver that magic of MDM. But there's a catch. And that catch is that, as we know about MDM, some assembly is required, right? That magic experience does require a little bit of work on the back end to make that all happen. And so this is where we've focused a lot of really thinking about how we can build Jamf Now to get to that magic experience while minimizing any of the pain or discomfort or complexity that's required to achieve that magical outcome. So let me give you an example of some of the pain points that you have to go through in order to achieve the magic. The first one, you have to set up an Apple push notification service certificate. And again, thinking about if you put yourself in the shoes of someone who's never heard of MDM before and who's never gone through an IT deployment project like this, it's very likely that this is the first time they've had to download a certificate signing request, upload that to the APNS portal, and then download their certificate. And chances are, when they first hear that term certificate, they're thinking something more like this and not something that is a cryptographically signed file that you can get from this Apple portal. Another one is the tokens that you need to upload for VPP and DEP. Again, for any of us who are familiar with Jamf Pro, you've probably, this is something that you can easily skip past. But if it's the first time you've ever experienced this, that idea of, where do I get these tokens? What are these tokens? And how do they work? This can be a bit of a point of friction. And then there's just the natural tension between the power of MDM, all the different things that you can do with a configuration profile, with MDM commands, the breadth of management power. That's the good part. But there is a cost to that, and that is that the first time you look at this, it can look a little daunting. It can be a little complex. Here I've just got a screenshot of the Apple configurator tool, and if I just look at the restrictions payload, there are dozens and dozens of different options. Now again, you can, of course, this is a powerful tool. You can do a lot with it. But how do you get past that learning curve? How do you get up that learning curve ramp quickly without feeling overwhelmed or without feeling the cost of complexity? So with this all in mind, how do we get that magic of MDM while we can really eliminate as much of the pain points as possible and help someone who is new to Apple device management get to that magical experience the fastest? And we approach this with the vision of simplicity. This is a quote from a book called The Laws of Simplicity. The simplest way to achieve simplicity is through thoughtful reduction. If you think about that, okay, that kind of makes sense. How do we apply that in our tool? Well, first off, we take a lot of care for all of those processes or all those workflows where you might have a moment of friction or a moment of unfamiliarity. We've taken a lot of care in designing that in a way that each step along the way, there's a clear outcome. There's a clear goal, a clear instruction, a clear next step. So let me give you an example of that. When a new customer signs up for Jamf Now, one of the first things that they have to do is they have to create their Apple Push Notification Service certificate. That's required so that we can communicate with their devices using the MDM protocol. So instead of just kind of throwing that as okay, go download this thing and come back to us, we've taken this process apart and laid it out as a few simple steps. So the first thing here is we'll give a new customer an overview. And on this page, there's a text description for people who prefer to read, and there's a video description that'll show you the whole process for people who are more visual learners. Then, after they click on the green button that says Let's Go, we're going to break this step apart into 3 steps. On each step, we have the text description, we have an image or a video to assist in that, and then each step has a single action required. So do one action, click next, do one action, click next, do one action, and then you're done. And we found that this has been a more successful path to kind of getting through that process where, again, it's likely the first time that a customer will ever have to go through a certificate creation process, and so we want to make this as easy as possible. Now, because this is that first, this is the first step that someone sees when they sign up for Jamf Now, we also want to make sure that we're not just doing this based on our assumptions, but we're actually testing all of this to really be confident that we're offering the best experience. And so we run tests for workflows like this. Here's an example. We took that same APNS configuration step, and instead of laying it out in step 1, 2, 3, we combined them all into one page. So it's still the same actions, but rather than clicking through 3 different pages, we laid it out on a single page. And this is where I will freely admit that my assumption was dead wrong. I assumed that laying it out on a single page would be that would be easier because everything's right there. You can just read what's on the page. There's no clicking. That seems like a better solution. In reality, when we tested this, the step-by-step page performed 12% better, meaning that 12% more success from our customers going through this process. And that's a really important point that was not at all lost on me because I'm in too deep already. I've been working with MDM for 8 years now, so I get it. And it's really, and it's that idea of forcing yourself to come at the problem with a beginner's mind or come at the problem from someone who hasn't done this before. It can be really challenging. And so all those assumptions that I carry with me, they're not worth much. Which is why we do real customer testing for any of our workflows like this. Another example of how we've approached this challenge of simplicity is what I'll call aggressive curation. So what do I mean by that? This is a screenshot from Jamf Pro. This is Jamf Pro version 10. You might be familiar with that. And this is looking at all of the options that are available within a configuration profile under the restrictions header. There's a lot of stuff you can do, right? Everything from AirPlay to printing, your different accounts for calendars and contacts and different flavors of email configuration. You can do network configurations for Wi-Fi, VPN, for your cellular radio. Lots of stuff is possible here. And again, this is great because it offers you a lot of power. But we looked at this and again we said, all right, if this is the very first time you've built a configuration profile, or taking a step back, maybe you've never heard of a configuration profile. How can we take this same power of MDM and make it more easy to approach? And so we shrunk that list down to these 6. We can configure email. We can configure passcodes. We can do restrictions payload. And within that restrictions, a subset of those. We can do a single app mode, and we can do Wi-Fi. And instead of laying that out as all the different options that you have in Jamf Now, it looks something like this. So we've laid out those options across the top. You can see it on the horizontal tabs with app, security, email, et cetera. And so we've actually we've simplified the whole concept of a configuration profile, where instead of building a configuration profile and applying that to a group of devices, and then later deploying apps, we've taken all these things together and made this idea of a blueprint. A blueprint is a combination of the apps that you need, so what are all the apps that you want to deploy on a device, and the configurations, where we've taken that subset, that curated list of the MDM configuration options and laid those out individually. And then you can assign any number of devices to your blueprint. So translating that from the Jamf Pro world, you can think of this as a static group, a series of configuration profiles, and a number of apps that are all scoped to the same static group. And instead of that being 3 or 4 or 5 different objects, we've combined those all into one to try to make this as easy as possible for people to find success with. Now, let's say that you come here, you're the very first time you log in, you're not quite sure where to go yet. We've also implemented the idea of recommendations. So if you're not sure what kind of apps you might need for your business, if you're not sure exactly what might be useful to me as I look to transform my business with my Apple devices, we've provided a list of app recommendations based on what we know about you. So we know your industry. In this case, I've signed up as a construction customer. And so based on that industry, we can recommend apps that we've found have been useful for other customers in your industry. We can also recommend blueprints. So if you're not quite sure how the blueprint can work, instead of starting from a blank slate, you can start from a recommendation where we've pre-populated several of those configurations for you. And we found that this has been really helpful because this is a way to try to get past that blank state, if you will. Instead of just saying like, here's a toolbox and it's got all the tools you're going to need, and then we're going to walk away, we're providing a model of like, this is one example of what you can do with these tools. And of course, you can change and update and modify that to fit your needs. But this is a way that we can help customers get started really quickly. Another example of that simplicity goal is contextualizing the information that we present about devices. So let me contrast here. Again, this is a screenshot of Jamf Pro. In the inventory view, Jamf Pro has a lot of power. You can see a lot of details about your devices, and you can customize the fields that you populate with things like extension attributes. So you really have an unlimited number of attributes that you can see about each of your devices. In the Jamf Now world, we've taken that and we've flipped it a little bit. So again, we've curated the list of what attributes we're going to show, and we've tried to provide some context by matching similar inventory attributes together, by adding some of these graphical elements to give a visual cue of what we're looking at here, and even adding, I don't know if I can show, yeah, on the very bottom there you can see we've added like contextual items like a graph that will show you the percentage full of your storage drive. Within the MDM command area, we've taken a few of the most commonly requested or most commonly used MDM commands, such as your activation lock bypass code. I guess actually this isn't a command, this is just an inventory item. But this is an example where this was a problem that lots of people have, and it can be extremely frustrating. An example of this, you have a number of employees. Each employee has an iPhone, and several of your employees might leave because they've retired or they've moved jobs, or for whatever reason, they're no longer working there. And you go to take their iPhone and wipe it and reset it for the next employee, and you find that you can't get past that activation screen because it's activation locked back to their Apple ID. And hopefully you have a friendly ex-employee who will come back and log in with their Apple ID and turn that off. But in a lot of cases, we've found customers who have they got a pile of devices that they can't use because they're stuck in this activation lock state. And of course, there are options to get around this. If you can bring this in and make an appointment at the Genius Bar at your local Apple retail store, there's ways to get around this. But the best way is if you're using Jamf Now, you get your activation lock bypass code, and you can immediately resolve this. So it's an example of taking a very frustrating and painful issue and resolving that without having to go through any other steps. Another example is the idea of lost mode. So this was introduced a few years ago into the MDM spec, and if you've got a device that goes missing, you can turn on lost mode, and that will actually send its location back to you so you can find where that is in the world. And if it's the kind of situation where it's not lost out there in the world, but maybe it's lost in the warehouse somewhere, you can also use this to play a sound. And here this is an example of curation where there's actually more options that you could configure when you're defining your lost mode. But we've tried to make this as easy as possible so that we're doing some of that curation for you. We've said this is the 3 fields in a checkbox that are going to be most often used, most frequently chosen. And so we're going to make that as simple to use as possible. So with all this curation, of course, this also comes with a cost, or there's a choice to be made here. And that choice is, if we're focused on curating that experience, we're focused on simplifying the user experience through that thoughtful reduction. What about all the stuff that gets left out? And here's examples. This is where, with Jamf Now today, you can't configure your VPN connection. We've chosen not to build that in right now. We don't do anything with package deployment. We don't do any custom apps. All the apps that you're deploying through Jamf Now come through the Apple App Store. We don't have anything like self-service. And as you can see from that list of all the different configuration profiles, there's lots of more advanced configurations that we simply don't offer. So this is the choice, and this is where it gets hard, because for every customer that really enjoys that simpler use model, where they can get started, where they can start with those recommendations, where they don't have to learn all the different configuration options, there's also customers who are asking for that one more thing. And so for us on the Jamf Now team, the challenge here is how do we provide the maximum value with the most power of the tool, while also maintaining that simple ease of use that a lot of people are really enjoying. But this is where I'm forever grateful for the fact that Jamf Now is part of Jamf. And with Jamf, of course, we have two products. We have Jamf Now, we've just spent the last half hour talking about, and we have Jamf Pro. And with Jamf Pro, you get it all. Jamf Pro is everything that you can do with the MDM spec and a lot more. And so for this is the best, this is the part that gives us the freedom and the flexibility to really be thoughtful about what it is we build with Jamf Now, because we know that for every customer who says, hey, I need a few more advanced features, we have a logical next step for them to go to. And so for our customers, we encourage people that, hey, if you're unsure, if you're not quite sure what you need, get started with Jamf Now. You can do that in 15 minutes. You can be up and running. And then as you go, if you discover that you need more of these advanced, powerful features of management, you always have that option to move to Jamf Pro while staying within the Jamf family. So let me leave you with this, and then I'll take Q&A. For everyone who didn't raise their hand at the beginning, who hasn't yet tried Jamf Now, open up your iPhone or your iPad, go to the App Store, and search for Try Jamf Now. And this is an app that we built. It's really intended for that first experience. You can, there's a big green button. You can try the demo. You can see exactly what this looks like. It's real live, connecting to our real live environment. You can try out that demo, and then if you want to, you can sign up directly from within that app. If you got a laptop on your lap right now and not an iPhone or an iPad, of course, you can also go to signup.jamfcloud.com, and you can get started right there. With that, let me say thank you, and then I will take your questions.
Big round of applause for Tad. Thank you, Tad. Good job. So we've got some microphones set up in the aisles here. So if anyone has any questions, make your way towards them. And as we wait for the masses to rush towards them, I've got a question here for you.
Shoot.
So this is a wonderful product, and I like how you described it as a curation of some of these features. How does someone, we talked about getting signed up. How much does Jamf Now cost?
Thank you. So Jamf Now is free for the first 3 devices. So if you're, for example, if you've got a couple kids at home and they've each got iPhones or iPads, it's totally free to use for the first 3 managed devices. And from your 4th device on up, it is $2 per device per month, and we bill you monthly. So that means that as your device count grows or shrinks, you're only paying for what you're using in that given month.
Excellent. Looks like we've got a question at the mic.
I'm curious if you've seen Jamf Now used alongside Jamf Pro in certain situations. Is there a use case for that?
Yeah, we've actually seen examples where if you can imagine in a larger organization where you might have different departments with different needs, we have actually seen where, for example, the central IT department is using Jamf Pro to manage most of their organization's devices, and then you might see like a field sales organization or a marketing organization with a different set of needs who's maybe trying out something different. They may need a little more flexibility, and they've been using Jamf Pro or Jamf Now. So yes, that happens, and of course that's great.
Great question.
So pertinent to that exact question, how would you transition? Let's say that somebody was on Jamf Now, had been trying it, but it turns out they really need some of the more advanced features. what's the possibility of moving someone from, I mean, would it just be a straight unenroll them all and re-enroll them in the Jamf Pro environment? Or do you have a path by which you could spin them up in a cloud-based Jamf Pro once they're already in Jamf Now?
Yeah, great question. So migrating from Jamf Now to Jamf Pro. I'd say the simplest and easiest way to do that is if you're using the device enrollment program, you can just move your DEP token from your Jamf Now to Jamf Pro. You can wipe your devices and they re-enroll into Jamf Pro. And you would be rebuilding like profiles and moving your apps over and such. But we do also have, as part of your service engagement when you switch to Jamf Pro, our professional services team, they're trained on how to assist in that migration process. And if you're in a spot where DEP is not available to you or it's not possible, then we do have some other options to help doing that migration in a seamless way. But to be clear, these are totally separate products, so you would be, essentially you'd be building the same workflows, but in a different way with Jamf Pro.
Great questions. We'll pause here for another minute, see if there's any more. I know we've talked about like the deployment programs. Does Jamf Now support DEP and VPP?
Yeah. So we do. We support both the device enrollment program and a volume purchase program, and we've found that those are really key to getting the most out of MDM in general and out of Jamf Now. So if you are considering this, I'd really encourage you to do that. I'd also mention that with the latest release of iOS 11 and Apple Configurator 2.5, there's now an option where if you're signed up for the DEP program, you can put devices that are not yet in DEP, you can actually add those into your DEP account using Apple Configurator. So if you have some older devices that you purchased somewhere that wasn't a DEP reseller, you now have a path to put those into the DEP program.
Question for you. Do you see people using Jamf Now on an individual basis, such as helping manage devices for elderly parents or something like that? It feels from what you're describing that Jamf Now is a little bit more oriented at initial setup rather than ongoing management. And just curious if you can have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, we certainly do see that. Like, obviously, our primary customer is a business or a school, but we do see that example. In fact, our CEO, Dean Hager, is managing all his family's iOS devices and Macs with Jamf Now right now. And when I look through our customer list, we do see several examples of the company name is an individual. I would say, I'd encourage you to check it out if you're interested in that. And in terms of the ongoing management, you do have the option, all those things that I showed you today, all the setup steps, of course, you can also do those anytime in the future. So if you want to update your apps or change apps that you're sharing on those devices, change a configuration, you can do that ongoing as well.
Are any of the API functions that exist in Jamf Pro, are any of those supported in Jamf Now?
The API? Mm-hmm. At this point, Jamf Now does not have a public API, but this is something that we're exploring for future development.
That was one of my questions. I've been using Jamf Now for 6 months.
Thank you.
For about 7 iPads. I'm wondering what's the, and this might not be, you might not be able to answer this. I'm wondering what the minimum amount of devices to go really to Jamf Pro.
Do you want to take that, Nick?
That's a great question. Our pricing for Jamf Pro, we do have a seat minimum of 50 devices. So that's kind of a nice threshold, at least for the Pro side of things. So if you want to jump into Pro, at least 50. And of course, now you can get started with 0 devices, 1 device if you want.
Yeah, and to be clear, there's no maximum on how many you can manage with Jamf Now either. So if you've got, several of our customers have hundreds of devices. I'm still waiting for our first 1,000 device customer, but there's no maximum to, there's no ceiling that you're going to hit.
Got another question here?
What are some of the roadblocks to prevent you to enter the market, such as China? And what are some of the possibilities to help you to enter that kind of market? Thank you.
Yeah, so roadblocks or challenges with entering new markets. I think that one example is language translations. Right now, Jamf Now is available in English, French, German, and Japanese. So as we look at new markets to enter into, we have to make sure that we have not only the product localization, but all of the supporting documentation and marketing materials, and that we have support resources available in that language. Another one is our, how we're doing payments. So primarily, Jamf Now is you enter in your credit card and we bill you once a month for your actual usage. And so we look at the payment options or the payment, what kind of bank, what are the payment card systems that are available to us. But I would say as we're looking at Jamf Now, we've now crossed the barrier where it's a little less than, a little more than 20% of our Jamf Now customers are outside of the US. So we're definitely doing a fair amount of business outside the US. And we're always looking at other opportunities to continue expanding that. So stay tuned.
All really great questions. I think that might wrap it up. Tad, thank you
Great.
again. Excellent information. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you all for coming.
Yeah.